Finally today, spring-born calves are usually reliant on supplementation through the winter months, and that can mean a low rate of gain. It is often assumed that providing mineral protein supplementation to target a pound per day gain during the winter months is the most economical system. However, UNO cow-calf specialist Dr. Karla Wilke tells us supplementing your cattle might not always pay off as well as you might think. Market Journal's Mike Straub brings us this story.
Supplementing calves through the winter for weight gain is a standard practice for cattle producers. An article in the January Beef Watch newsletter, Winter Supplementation of Beef Calves When Supplementation Doesn't Pay, points out that the economic impact may not be what most expect. Assistant Professor of Animal Science, Cow, Calf, and Range Management Specialist Dr. Karla Wilke explains.
So these would be spring-born calves. This would be a traditional system for a lot of producers where they would wean spring-born calves and then, they would wean spring-born calves in the fall, and then they would supplement them through the winter. And a lot of times the paradigm is simply to feed them enough protein supplement to get them through the winter. And so that targeted rate of gain a lot of times is half a pound a day gain to a pound a day gain. And the research that I brought out in this article would suggest that that's kind of a waste of money. The research suggested that if you take 450-pound calves or 500-pound calves and you supplement them, one study we took 450-pound calves, supplemented 0, 1, little over 2, little over 3 pounds of distillers grains on a dry matter basis a day during the winter, and got a nice linear response to that. The calves gained a little over half a pound a day, clear up to 1.75 pounds. Then those calves went to winter wheat pasture. And so that's kind of even in Nebraska, we don't graze a lot of winter wheat pasture, but that's a typical thing that we would then go to a higher quality forage like spring grass. And so basically what that study showed was that the calves that were not supplemented at all during the winter experienced compensatory gain, and they ended up coming off of the wheat pasture grazing or the high quality forage grazing weighing the same as the calves that just got the first level and were just targeted at a pound a day gain. And so basically that expense of that supplement was lost on those calves. However, the calves that were supplemented to gain 1.5 pounds to 1.75 pounds maintained their gain throughout that higher quality forage grazing system. And so that gain was still, that gain advantage, that weight advantage was still there at the end of that grazing.
Research shows that supplementing enough grains to maintain 1.5 pounds a day gain seem to be the most economical practice, even when the price of feed is increased.
In the meta-analysis of 6 studies that I talked about in the article, those were 500-pound calves that were supplemented in the winter to either target half a pound or 1.5 pounds gain. And in those 6 studies, not only were the cattle followed through in subsequent summer grazing where they had high quality forage, but they were also followed through the finishing phase. And much like the previous study that I just mentioned, what they found was that the calves that were only supplemented to gain half a pound a day, once they got to grass, they only compensated about 37%. So that means that the calves that were supplemented at a higher rate of gain in the winter also finished the summer still in a weight advantage over the calves that weren't supplemented very much. And in all 6 of those studies, that weight advantage was maintained all the way through the finishing period. So supplementing just a little bit to kind of get the cattle by, as we sometimes say, was a waste of money because they experienced compensatory gain over the summer. But if you supplemented to gain 1.5 pounds or so, then you could maintain that advantage. Economically, that worked out even when distillers grains was priced a little higher like it is this year due to some drought conditions and higher corn prices, and in years when distillers was priced lower.
Some considerations when deciding to supplement are the quality of the calf's base diet, how much supplement it would take to make up the nutrients in the base diet, and when the producer is going to sell their cattle.
So what we need to consider when we're deciding what to supplement is the quality of the base diet that the calves are going to be on, and how much supplement it would take to make up the difference in the nutrients in the base diet versus the nutrients they need to gain 1.5 pounds. And then some other considerations would be when they are going to sell those calves. So in the first study that I talked about, the calves that were sold at the end of the dormant native range, the winter grazing, those producers would have made the most money by feeding for those calves to gain 1.75 pounds. If they were to hold those calves over to the summer, then most frequently, and in most situations, given a sensitivity analysis of various prices for calves and prices for distillers, the most solid economic decision was to supplement those calves to gain 1.5 pounds during winter range grazing.
If you plan to supplement calves through the winter for optimal weight gain, keeping to the standard practices may not make sense economically. Reporting for Market Journal, I'm Mike Straub.